there is nothing wrong with changing the world with success, with passion about helping people find health and healing and thrive state. These things are good things. The problem comes when we sacrifice our relationships, those connections with either a partner or our children or our parents or even our pets. So if we're choosing work, an addiction basically becomes an addiction when it crowds out other healthy things in our life. So if it's just working and we're doing 4 hours a week and we have wonderful relationships and time to rest and make good food and time to play and hike in the mountains or ski or whatever we like to do, it's not an addiction.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Thrive State Podcast. I am your host, Dr. V, triple board certified MD and performance and longevity expert. And on today's podcast, we really talk about our emotional states and how they influence our health. Have you ever felt guilt, shame, unworthiness? Well, these feelings, what we feel actually becomes biochemical messengers that will turn on and turn off genes that either give us chronic disease and symptoms, or they could put us in what I call the thrive state to achieve optimal health, longevity, and peak performance. Today with me on the podcast is someone that is really a thought leader in the world of functional medicine. And she is actually a physician that has gone through cancer and autoimmune disease, here to tell her story of how living a life that is unconscious, living a life where there were emotions of worry, of shame, of guilt, brought disease in her body. And so I want you to understand through this conversation that how we live our life, our approach, our perspective in life can be poison or it can be our medicine. Now, before we get into the podcast, if you are new to the podcast, welcome in. This is a place where every week I have the extreme opportunity of bringing in thought leaders and experts in the world of biohacking, science, technology, ancient wisdom, and spirituality so that you can achieve what I call the thrive state. This is really an energetic state of being where you feel like you are at your best, where you feel like you are living life, because that actually turns on the genes of human performance and longevity. And if you want to jumpstart your journey, if you haven't done so already, pick up my free longevity and resource kit at thrivestatestarter.com. And if you haven't already, pick up my book, Thrive State, at thrivestatebook.com. That will really give you the framework and the tools to live your very best life now. Now, this podcast is actually an interview I did for my Thrive State Summit, where I had the opportunity of interviewing 50 of the world's thought leaders in mental and emotional wellness. And we have here Dr. Jill Carnahan. She is a functional medicine expert. She has been teaching doctors all around the world in functional medicine, but she has truly an amazing story of going from multiple different diseases, reversing them, and living her best life yet. I know you're going to find her story inspirational, but more than a story, I think you'll find tools and tactics you could apply to your life right now to have massive change. Now, if you enjoyed today's interview and want all the interviews as well as digital assets that I have to put you into the Thrive State, go to mythrivestate.com/pro and use the code ThriveState50 to receive 50% off all digital content that is meant to get you into the Thrive State. So ladies and gentlemen, please enjoy this conversation with myself and Jill Carnahan. Hello and welcome back to another session of the Thrive State Summit. I'm so glad to invite one of my friends in the integrative medicine space because she's got a journey. I think it's so inspiring. Dr. Jill Carnahan's journey is one of the most remarkable resilience and healing stories I know of. And her passion of finding answers to complex problems had led her from a farm upbringing to a medical career focused on harnessing the body's innate capacity to heal. However, it was her personal encounter with cancer at the age of 25 that transformed her perspective on life and success. After being diagnosed with invasive breast cancer, Dr. Carnahan underwent rigorous treatments and for a time transitioned from a medical student to a patient. Her journey from doctor to patient instilled in her the importance of a holistic approach to healing, including nutrition, exercise, faith, and surrender to the process. And despite all odds, Dr. Carnahan has triumphed over cancer, but her quest for well-being doesn't stop here. 6 months later, she was diagnosed with Crohn's disease, a painful autoimmune condition. Unwilling to accept a life of medications and surgeries, she turned to the power of food and naturopathic principles, ultimately achieving optimal health. And today, Dr. Carnahan is not only a survivor, but a beacon of hope for her patients, helping them navigate complex illnesses and transforming their lives. Her journey illustrates the incredible potential of the human body when given the right tools for healing. Dr. Jill, welcome to the summit.
Thank you so much for having me, and what a beautiful, kind introduction.
Dr. Jill, I know, speaking for myself, that there were parts of me living life running through this program that I was not enough, I was not worthy. And so I constantly thought that success on the outside would bring that to me. And as a medical doctor, I strive to get into the top institutions, top residency programs, interventional radiologist, chief of interventional radiology, to only discover that that process drew the biology of disease in me. I was overweight, diabetic, and high blood pressure. How has your journey from the cancer diagnosis to overcoming chronic disease, how has those challenges reshaped your perspective on what success and well-being is in their relationships?
Wow, I love that we're going right to the heart because I know you and I are not so dissimilar from your listeners. And so often I remember the day and the time when I sat in this room full of successful health entrepreneurs and I heard the speaker and he was talking about addiction. And I kind of tuned out because I thought, well, I don't really do drugs. I've never really been a drinker. I'm not an addict, right? I kind of put myself in this category that wasn't that. And I just tuned out. And then all of a sudden he got my attention. He kind of pointed to all of us and he said, all of you here in this room are addicts and your addiction is work and achievement. And I was like, whoa, wait a second. He's talking to me. And of course, sorry, the truth is like you told your journey. There's this piece of us that for me, it was I had this wonderful family that valued education, and they did not tell me that I was loved based on achievement. I had wonderful parents, but somehow, as a little girl, the first straight A that I got, and then more and more and more, I got this sense of being more worthy and more loved because of my achievements, right? No one told me that. I just intuitively thought that. And so all of a sudden I'm on the hamster wheel of valedictorian and then a successful college career and graduating top of the class and then medical school. And what happens is those are very good dopamine highs. They reinforce themselves as a behavioral. And then we go to the next time, the next time, the next time. But what happens in the journey is all of a sudden we start to lose our sense of self and our sense of belonging and worthiness just for being, not for achievement, not for the straight A's, not for the accolades on the wall and the degrees behind our name, but just for being Jill and just for being you. For me, I kind of lost that and I was on this treadmill of achievement and I got my value and worthiness from that. And that's a heady drug. That's as heady as a heroin shot, right? And so all of a sudden you're doing that. And the downside is your health can suffer because you're constantly, constantly pushing, trying, striving. I was a hard worker. I knew how to work hard, but there's a limit to our bodies and we need the sleep and we need the rest and we need the play. And all of that actually creates a much more diverse life and relationships. And I sacrificed a lot in that quest to become the best in my field and become a physician. And then this day when I realized, oh, it's actually an addiction. Now, it's socially acceptable and it's not a bad thing. We're helping the world. It's not like it's evil or awful but there's a piece of that if you don't understand that and then try to bring back balance. Our bodies, our minds, our spirits suffer. And I do believe that my getting breast cancer in the middle of medical school at 25, Crohn's disease at 26 the year after were part of my body saying, excuse me, Jill, you were not meant to work this hard, this many hours with no rest and improper diet and sleep. And the problem with medical training, as you well know, it enforces that sense of like, don't sleep, don't eat, don't pee. How like your accolades are how much can you deprive your human body and suffer through those times.
Yeah.
So I had to really shift in order to find healing and find out how am I worthy of love and acceptance just for being and how can I sit still, which I didn't know how to do. And all of these things, because as we do that, we start to actually find a deeper sense of self and identity, and it's not revolving around success and what the world tells us we need to be.
I think you alluded to this earlier when you talked about just being you and just being, and that's all you need to be safe, to be loved, and to be connected. But what would you say for people who struggle with success addiction? Because at some point, you just don't know if that's what you're doing or if you're doing good things. How can we begin to recognize that it's more than just achieving, it's becoming something that potentially is detrimental to us?
Yeah, I love that you say that because there is nothing wrong with changing the world with success, with passion about helping people find health and healing and thrive state. These things are good things. The problem comes when we sacrifice our relationships, those connections with either a partner or our children or our parents or our even our pets. So if we're choosing work, an addiction basically becomes an addiction when it crowds out other healthy things in our life. So if it's just working, and we're doing 4 hours a week and we have wonderful relationships and time to rest and make good food and time to play and hike in the mountains or ski or whatever we like to do, it's not an addiction. But when it crosses the boundary and starts to affect our ability to sleep, we can't sleep, we have insomnia, our ability to connect with people, we have to work all the time, we have to hide our work, we have to secretly sneak away and work. Those are the kind of like
Yeah, uh-huh.
things, right? Or we can't really carry on a conversation because we're thinking about all the things we need to do. Those are signs of an addict and they're signs of it going. So there's just a boundary crossing. And I loved what you mentioned there, which is so critical. I found that in my journey of healing in this realm, I first had to trust myself and my intuition. We're taught in medicine, it's all about the analytical mind. And fortunately, I'm a bioengineer. I have a good analytical mind and I used it, but I used it at the expense of feeling. I would just be like, feelings do not matter. They have no scientific validity. If I felt sad, angry, whatever kinds of shut up, be quiet, I would suppress that and just go right to the analytical mind to deal with my problems. Not bad. But what happens is you get disconnected from yourself and it's only in our body that we can actually tell what's good for us. Like maybe you go into that room and there's someone arguing, you can walk into that room and sense kind of that energy of like, oh, there's something not right here. Or you walk down a dark alley and you're like, oh, there's something not right here. And you go a different way and you find out, oh, there was a mugger that night in Chicago. Or so we have these intuitive senses, but they come from trusting our bodily sensations, our gut instincts. And in medicine training, I don't know about you, but those were taught to be not valid. So we kind of went here into our head, devalidated our psychosomatic symptoms and feelings and gut intuition. And in order to get to a place where we actually love and appreciate ourselves and show up for ourselves, we have to first trust our instincts. So we have to relearn, at least for me, I'm just speaking, I had to go down below the neck and get back in touch with my heart and soul and say, what's really right for me? And what's right for me is to have rest and to have play and to have friends and to have relationships and work. I love work. I'll never not love work, but I had to come back in balance. And in order to come back in balance, you first have to go back into that intuitive heart and say, what do I really need? What do I really want?
Yeah, I can look back in my journey right when I had to pivot because I was overweight, I was diabetic, I was chief of interventional radiology. All the work accolades were there to be able to say, you're doing the right things. But when I had to think back at that moment in time, if I could remember things that brought me joy, if I remember things that lit me up, I couldn't define them. Because in track to go through medical school and training, you've got all these things lined up for you to do. You had all these tests and residency programs and late nights at the hospitals, and you said no to probably a lot of things that potentially would have filled up your own cup. And I've said no so many times to myself that at that moment in time, I had forgotten what the yeses were. And I don't know if that's what it was like for you, but I think that's what some of the mental health issues we're facing is just saying no to your authentic self and the things that you intuitively feel that make you feel good and putting on a mask or fitting into a mold that's not you. Yeah?
Yes, and I think we could say it in the sense of what we are experts at delayed gratification, right? There is study after study that shows those children that can delay gratification. They do studies where there's like a candy, like the expert leaves the room, the study researcher, and the child has to like watch that candy and not eat the candy. And those children that could delay the gratification actually went on to be more successful in life. So you and I, we became experts in delaying gratification. But again, this is a pendulum, it's a spectrum. When you go to the side, all of a sudden what you do is you forget to be present because the present joys are really the only place we can really, really experience life. We can't go past, we can remember and we can think about future and plan and vision. But the only place you can really have joy is right here in the moment. Here I am talking to you. I'm fully present and I couldn't be more excited. And that's where I get my joy, not from yesterday's interview or tomorrow's interview. And because of that, if we are experts at delayed gratification, we learn to suppress the here and now and the joy. And I loved what you said because what happened to you and what happened to me is all of a sudden we're like, what do I like? What do I want? Do I even know anymore what brings me joy? And that is the sentence for an unhappy and depressed life.
Yeah. You know, a lot of people that are watching, I know, might be very type A people, CEOs, professionals, celebrities, athletes. Balancing ambition and well being can be challenging. So, what advice would you give to people who are the type A people, feel torn between their career aspirations and a desire for a balanced and fulfilling life?
Oh gosh, and this is like I still every day deal with this. When you are passionate about what you do and your work, it's not work. It is something that also brings you joy. And I'm in that state. I love what I do. So there is no shame about loving your work and working hard. But the advice I would give is the hallmark of genius is curiosity and play. And what we often do is we forget how to play. And I have learned one of the things as I was writing my book and trying to research some of this stuff that we're talking about, I started coloring again. I would take coloring books to the coffee shop with my colored pencils, and I found it took me into a state of childlike curiosity and play. And you could do, roller skating, or you could do just singing out loud in the lawn as you're walking through the neighborhood, or I mean, or you could go dancing. There's all kinds of things that are much more playful, and you can think of 100 other things I haven't mentioned, but when we start to incorporate play instead of just the work, and whatever that looks like for you, we kind of go back to that childlike mindset. And that childlike mindset thinks anything's possible. And literally, like big, big companies that are highly successful are now hiring their engineers not based on their degrees, but based on their curiosity and creativity. And it's often tested in these kind of childlike games, like take a bag of M&Ms and how many things can you make out of that, like spaceships and or whatever it is. I'm just making these things up, but it's this childlike play that actually gets the most creative solutions in life anyway. So it's going to help you in your career. But if you've lost that play, that's where you're going downhill and you need to come back to play.
I hope you're enjoying the podcast so far. If you are, I just wanted to let you know, join our community. There's so many free resources and a great community of people that desire health, happiness, human potential to have more in their life, more health, more energy. And when you have those two things together, you could create more happiness, more abundance, whether it be financial, romantic, all these things in your life. And if you're just starting out, you don't know where to go, just sign up for thrivestatestarter.com, because in there you're going to get a bundle of information that includes a longevity ebook, a longevity and performance resource guide, lecture notes that come from my keynotes at Google, at Fortune 500 companies, all the insights in that keynote in lecture slide form given to you. And then finally, breathwork. I share 3 powerful breathwork exercises to access calm, which really gives you clarity and peace during the day, to access energy if you need to wake up and really motivate yourself, and finally, a breathwork routine that you could do every single morning so that you could be very intentional with how you create that day. You can find all this stuff delivered free to your inbox at thrivestatestarter.com. And our community is growing. If you want to be a part of a community of people that desire the Thrive State, that are really in Thrive State themselves and help other people along with that, you could be a part of the community. You can get group coaching from me. We do breathwork sessions, meditation sessions, and you also get to drop in and participate in podcasts in the future. You could find more about the community at mythrivestate.com. That's mythrivestate.com. So check out those resources. You're not going to be disappointed. And please enjoy the remainder of this podcast.
That's such an important thing. And one of the things that I think would be a theme and a pillar for mental health is play, because we know that the states of play actually quiets down parts of our brain called the default mode network, which is potentially a lot of the rules and things that were programmed for us before we were even conscious. To tap into flow, we know the default mode network has to quiet down, and play is one of those things that quiets down that default mode network. So thank you for mentioning that. You've gone through breast cancer, you went through Crohn's disease, and I believe also mold. Let's talk a little bit about resilience. You've been able to bounce back, and resilience really means to be able to bounce back. What have you found to be the difference makers for people that have the adaptive capabilities to be able to spring back? Do we all have it, or is it something that we can nurture?
Yes. So first of all, deep down, we all have that potential. So every single one of you listening out there has that same potential. Some of us have more than others, but absolutely it can be learned. And what I have found with resilience, I've learned from some of my favorite writers and brilliant people who have suffered far more than me, writers like Viktor Frankl for meaning, right? And Edith Eger, The Gift, and many other things. And both of them are happen to be Holocaust survivors. And again, I always just, my suffering doesn't even compare to what many people have been through, and probably some of you listening. Mine doesn't compare, and I know that. But what I know is the commonality between them and the things I've learned from them are no man, no suffering, no illness can take away our mindset and our ability to see something different, to view things differently. So when we shift our perspective, which is, say, for example, I get breast cancer. This was my first lesson in this realm of resilience, and then I've had many more. But when that first came, at first it's like, oh my goodness, this sucks. I hate this. I don't want this to happen. And I resist, resist, resist. But very shortly, this kicked in, this innate ability to see things differently. And I thought, well, what if there's something good here? And you first start by framing it in your subconscious and telling yourself, what else is possible? What if, dot, dot, dot. There's these questions that we can ask that allow our subconscious to start to chew on this and actually bring us to the conclusion that maybe there's something good here. So we literally have to start asking the questions. And this is also the hallmark of curiosity and genius. And it's basically asking those questions, what else is possible? What is something different? And just believing that there is deeper meaning and purpose, even in the most difficult things. Now, I would never want someone to go through that. I'm not saying that suffering is good or pleasant, but the truth is we either have gotten through something difficult recently, we're in it right now, or it's coming around the bend. That is life, right? And we like to pretend that we have certainty and that we have control, and we have neither. In fact, with Hans Selye's data, his biggest threats to our ego and uncertainty and stress were this NUTS acronym: novelty, unpredictability, threat to ego, or threat to health, and a sense of control. So we think we have control. We think we have our health. We think we have all these things. And the truth is we have none of them. But if we can actually be surrendered to the process and trust that even something really, really painful like breast cancer or death of a loved one, I mean, or whatever kinds of things you've been through, financial devastation, that in that process, there is something good. There is some meaning and purpose. Then all of a sudden, you can shift your brain to start searching for what could this possibly be good? And you might even be a pessimist, like, how could this possibly be good? But what happens when you start to ask the questions is what I did is like, oh, wait, breast cancer might teach me a thing or two. And guess what? It did. And guess what? Beyond that, it was the foundation of where I am today, because all of a sudden I went from doctor to patient, as you said in the intro, and I learned what it was like to be in the patient's seat. And now I have the deepest empathy and compassion and understanding that I would never have had I not gone through that.
Oh, so good. You know, I'm probably a little bit younger than you, but I think the more we go through life, the more we can say that the entire life process is a gift. You know, I'm a radiologist. Sometimes we have the retrospectoscope. If you know a diagnosis, you can go back in time and say, oh, no, that thing was there.
Yeah.
And I think if we can look at all these things being gifts and being able to use the retrospectoscope today, or maybe even taking the future self, asking yourself, where is the gift in this moment I'm going through? It's a beautiful thing. You know, last year I went through a period of time where, you know, somebody I hired basically ended up making my company lose $500,000. It was financially devastating, but my ability to forgive and my ability not to hold my self-worth to a bank account number, that's something I could share from the heart that can't
Yes.
be taken away. The feelings of not feeling worthy and enough. I remember having my daughter. She was born with a cord wrapped around her neck and ankle. And I thought we were going to lose her. In the moment, I wanted to blame the doctors. I wanted to blame the hospital. And I was like, how is this thing happening for me? I took that breath, or I took a pause. You know, Viktor Frankl said between stimulus and response, there's a space in which we can choose our response. And so I wanted to, I was seriously about to go off with the doctors. And then I asked myself, where is the gift seriously right now in the ICU? And I swear to God, right when I asked that question, the nurse asked me if I wanted to hold my daughter for the first time. So I held my daughter. I remember seeing her. She had tubes down her nose, tube down her mouth. She had IVs all over her arms and legs. And I remember looking at her and I was thinking, you know, health complication or not,
Yeah.
she's absolutely perfect. And I
Yes.
love her so much just the way she is. And then that just sort of gave me a realization that all of us who's been given this gift of life, no matter what it looks like, is certainly worthy.
Yeah.
And I remember at that moment, there was just this huge wave of healing that just overcame me, even me,
Yeah.
happening for me, not to me. So thank you for mentioning that. As you were talking now, you talked about faith and surrender. How do you think faith and surrender play in the role of our mental health, and how can that be something that we can use to draw on during difficult times?
Oh, I love that you asked that because in this world, it's hard to talk about this. And I just want to say, first of all, whether you believe in God, divine, or not, this can apply. And I'm going to share from my heart, my experience, but there is no judgment whether you're listening and any spectrum, because I believe that we all have our own way of connecting with the divine, whether that's just meaning and purpose or a true deep faith or whatever practices. So I want to come with no judgment and no agenda. But I want to share from my heart because it has transformed my life, and part of that was the moment I got cancer. I didn't know if I had 6 weeks or 6 months or 6 years. Now it's 20 plus years and I'm healthy and you see me, and of course, it's the end of the story, right? But in the middle of the story, like you said, you don't always know. But I remember very quickly, within weeks of my diagnosis, I heard a pastor on the radio and he said, "The sickness will not end in death. It's for the glory of God." And again, whatever that looks like for you, for me, it was very clear. Oh, that was that meaning like, oh, wait, there's a piece here that could bring greater meaning and purpose to my life and to the lives that future patients that come across my path. And for me, that was the divine giving me a sense of, I'm going to live. And from that moment on, there was not one day where I doubted that I was going to live. And you talk about mindset, even if it was just false belief and faith in someone else who's an atheist says, well, Jill, that's just, ridiculous. I don't care because that belief that I was going to live transformed and helped me to overcome and be 20 years later survivor. So it's literally that mindset. And it's interesting because I was just in Australia. We talked about my trip and we had someone talk about cancer and they were talking from a completely scientific perspective. Those people that have a belief that they're going to live a mindset around life, they do better. Period. It's scientific, right? So however that comes about for you, for me, there was a deep faith in the divine. And then the second thing I wrote about in chapter 4 of my book, and the title is Believe, Act, Wait. It's funny when we start to write things down, journaling, writing a book, whatever, we start to see patterns in our own life. And this kind of literally in the writing of the book, I could have never told you this before, but it's my pattern. And what it is I believe in what's possible. This is like miracles, like things that are unexpected. This is kind of the step we've been talking about. And then I act. I do in my ability what I can do. I try to go for that degree. I apply for the job. What I'm capable of, I act and do my part. And then the wait thing is where I say, hey, subconscious, divine, universe, whatever you want to call it, I need your help. And I need you to show up in a way that's bigger than what I'm capable of. And always over and over, I could tell you story after story after story. I believe in something that seems crazy, miraculous, unbelievable. I do my part and then I trust and wait. And then the outcome is far bigger than I could have done on my own because I have the divine on my side. And again, it could be the friends and family that come in my path and help me. But again, the story after story after story is that wait part is where we see something show up that we never expected. And that's literally the title of my book. It was unexpected because when we expect the unexpected, we see truly things that we could have never seen without that mindset.
That's so beautiful. I was just interviewing a guy by the name of David Lyon, and he has something very similar and an acronym of I am. And it starts with the intention, which is basically the belief or the energy or the frequency that is that belief. And then A is the action, to M, manifest what's happening.
Yes, exactly.
Well, at this point, what would you say for anyone who has success addiction at this point, redefine their path to success and to prioritize well-being and fulfillment in their lives? What do you think is some action steps or some resources that people can use to probably live a more fulfilling and more well-balanced life?
Yeah, I'll kind of speak for myself because that's where I learned. I learned this. I'm still in the process, probably like most of you listening. First thing is you have to trust your heart, your intuition, your feelings. And again, we don't give a lot of credence to that all the time. But when we start to live in our body, become more embodied, and practical ways you can do any sort of somatic therapy from tapping to EMDR to thought field therapy to brain spotting to some of the new programs, CUPTA, DNRS, primaltrust.org, and all these. I don't have any affiliations to any, but there's a bunch of different programs out there, neuro-linguistic programming. And the truth is, I've done them all. I have literally gone through over the last 7 to 10 years and over because I want to be a better person. I want to be a better human. So I've done all these things, and little by little by little, I've evolved. And part of that is being embodied in my mind and my body, not just using my analytical mind, but using my body to decide and make decisions based on the connection. Second thing is, if you're someone who's used to achievement, you're used to going, doing, achieving, and that's all action. And there's a piece of being, which is stillness, that you need to practice. And whether that's meditation, for me, I could never meditate. My mind is going like a million miles an hour. So I learned to lucid dream instead. And that's just another option for a creative person to go into a meditative state. But instead of being quiet in my mind, I'm actually creating dream worlds and visions and manifestations. And for me, that works.
Wow.
But the other thing is, when you have this sense of going, doing all of that stuff, it's hard to sit still, because when you sit still or just be present, usually those old emotions that you kind of stuff down, sadness, anger, fear, will start to come up. And as they percolate up, it's pretty scary because you work so hard to suppress them. So actually practicing being with your feelings, being with yourself, letting them flow through, knowing you're not going to drown, because it feels like you are when you first start doing that. And it's funny because you talk about like anxiety, depression, and mood disorders. I think sometimes that work can cover up underlying anxiety or fear or anger or sadness because you've never felt it, because you worked so hard to suppress it. So I had to, in my own healing, start to feel again and know that I would be okay. And when I first opened that door, I thought I was going to die. I was like, went through this like 2 weeks of depression. I've never been depressed in my life, but it was like 40 years of sadness coming all at once. So as you know and understand this is going to happen, and be kind to yourself, that's one of those gifts that you can just start to unravel these old patterns, and then you can show up in the present more authentically.
So beautiful. I want to thank you for everything that you've contributed today. Such a great conversation, and from the heart too. And if people want to find out more about you, your work, and everything that you do, where do people find you?
Yeah, my website is just jillcarnahan.com, and you can follow me on Instagram at Dr. Jill Carnahan as well.
Dr. Jill, thank you again for your wisdom, your frequency, for the deep work that you've done so that you can be a vessel of high frequency for others. Thank you for participating in the Thrive State Summit.
Thank you for doing this work and bringing it out to the world as well.
I hope you enjoy that episode of the Thrive State podcast. And if you're finding that this content is really helping you and your family members, please consider supporting our mission and our cause of elevating health, happiness, and human potential for people all over the world. You can do so by making sure that you subscribe to this podcast, sharing it with your friends and family members, and leaving us a 5-star review wherever podcasts are heard. All these things are going to really help elevate the show and to give us the resources to continue to bring more content just like this to yourself as well as the people that you love. If you haven't already, you might want to consider joining our community. We actually have a community where people get to engage with me in group sessions, where we do breathwork, meditation, where we do challenges together, really to be able to get us access to health, happiness, human potential, so that we could have longevity and performance in our life as well. You can check out our community at mythrivestate.com. That's mythrivestate.com. And if you haven't already, pick up a copy of my book, Thrive State. It really gives you all the tools, the pillars that you need to create a blueprint to control the energetics of your life. Who are you? How you show up in the world? The choices that you consistently make create an energy in your body, and you can control this. And when you can control that, you also control the messages you give to your DNA that gives you access, again, to optimal health, longevity, and peak performance. And let me also just share a free gift to you. If you haven't already, please pick up my longevity and performance bundle, where I share lecture notes, ebooks, breathwork exercises, and longevity and performance resources at thrivestatestarter.com. Thank you so much for being a part of this community. Thank you for helping us grow. Remember always, my friends, that you are your best medicine.